Hey everybody, welcome back to Brainwashing Children. This is my first live stream show, and this is going to be my interview with Ruth Markel. She is the author of The Unveiling, which is a book about grandparental alienation and the case of her son who was tragically murdered in his garage about 8.5 years ago. So without further ado, I'm going to get in real quick with Ruth. Ruth is all the way from Toronto, Canada. Ruth, introduce yourself real quick and tell everybody basically how you got into this topic.
Hi, first of all, I am so delighted that you're actually talking about brainwashed children and grandparent alienation, because I think that they're really topics that are sort of underneath a lot of family conflicts and really don't surface and are not talked about. And so this is a very important opportunity for me to express my gratitude that we are really starting to expose these very difficult topics. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book called The Unveiling and why I wrote The Unveiling and what it means. The title of The Unveiling is very significant. It basically talks about the opportunity to give a voice to grief and to give a voice to the difficult issues in our life today. Now, one of the things about why it's called The Unveiling, there's a traditional Jewish ceremony after a tombstone is placed on the gravesite, and you inscribe in it, but you lift the curtain, you lift the fabric, and you have a special religious ceremony. And that's when my grief process started. But more important, I really want to talk about lifting the curtain to the public, and not so much only the religious parts at all, but really to show the public what it feels like to be a victim in a crime experience and to expose grandparent alienation. So this is really the purpose of our topic today, is really let's talk about what all of this is going on. Let's really give a voice. I'll just say one thing about Dan and then we'll get right into it, because Dan was a very noted scholar in legal circles all over the United States. He also started something called Prof's Blog. But to me, his biggest accomplishment was what he was like as a father. And as a father, Dan loved his children. He wanted them to know that they had a background, they had connections to their family. And moreover, he actually, when he had to separate, which was a terrible disaster for him and for us, he actually went to the children's daycare on his off days from his custody. And he went and he basically had breakfast with them all the time. And then after that, he actually made in his living room a large dining room, living room, and a big area. And he put a clothesline across the ceiling of the living room, dining room, and he hung all the children's art. And I used to tease him, I should say, that this is preschool decor.
That's such a cute story. So tell the audience, how did you get introduced to the topic of parental alienation, which means, of course, we're going to go back to when your son was still alive. So walk us through a little bit how this came to be a knowledgeable topic to you.
It was a very, very sad topic, a very difficult topic and stressful topic. Dan had a very conflictual divorce with with my ex-daughter-in-law, his wife at the time. And one of the things that kept on blowing up was some of the interference from Wendy, that was her name, the wife, her mother, her name was Donna. And Donna continuously interfered in the earlier parts of the marriage as well, but particularly on brainwashing the children and parental alienation. They divorced in 2013, and the children were actually only, at the time of the divorce, one was born in 2010, and one was born in 2009. So they were very, very young children, but they were very talkative. And one of the things they started to tell Dan is that grandma says, "You're stupid." And the children and Dan, he was in shock. And he says, well, he wanted to hear more. He says, "Why do she say you're stupid?" So she said, and from their mouths, that you want to take her sunshines away. And they did this 3 times in November 2013. So the divorce is July, and this is now happening 2013. And then after that, in November 2014, the little one, and he's young, Lincoln, says to Dan that she hates you. And so Dan says, how did you hear she hates me? He says, we were all together, and Wendy was sitting there also. So Wendy's sitting in front of her mother, telling the children that she hates Dan. And these little young children are repeating this.
Yeah, textbook parental alienation. And, mother had a chance there to step up and go, Mom, knock it off. That's their dad. Quit saying negative things while they're here. But she didn't. So, okay. So as it continues, now the divorce this is after the divorce. So what happened then leading up to the actual murder of Dan?
So Dan is a lawyer, and he's very easy with his pen and his writing and citations. And he decided to write a motion to the court in March 2014 to have Donna have she had to have supervised visitation. In other words, he had a motion which was already presented, through their process that basically she should have supervised visitation. At the same time, the marital settlement agreement, which is very specific in Florida, talks about parental alienation, and that you're not supposed to have any parental alienation as part of the divorce agreement. Anyway, so this persisted, and this is now March 2014. There was unfortunately a continuance on that case, and now I'll tell you how we get to the crime. So you introduced it properly. This is a murder. This is a murder for hire. It's a very unusual kind of a murder. And here's the background. So Dan was basically going to the daycare on July 18th, 2014, then to the gym. And then as he comes home in his driveway, he's shot. Okay, so he's shot on July 18th and dies on July 19th. So it's just, really much, very short period of time. Now, what happens, it takes 2 years. In the first 2 years, we actually did see the children. And after the arrests, which occurred in 2016, so May 28th, 2016, a man called Zigfredo Garcia is arrested. But this is the significant part. 2 days later, not 2 days later, on June the 2nd, there's a probable cause affidavit. And this gets released. And in the probable cause affidavit, 2 names are noted as unindicted co-conspirators. One of them is Donna Adelson, that's Wendy's mother, the grandmother of the boys. And the other is Charlie Adelson, the brother of Wendy. So this was alarming. I mean, all along before, there was all kinds of speculation as who could have done it, who didn't do it. But this now becomes a reality. The other 2 people who were arrested in that year, so on June 17th, 2016, Luis Rivera, and he's the driver. And then October 1st of 2016, a woman called Catherine McBanawa, who is the go-between Charlie Adelson and Garcia. She dates Charlie Adelson, but she's the kind of a common law relationship with Garcia and has 2 children. So these are the 3 people right away involved in the murder for hire. Just recently, April 21st, 2022, Charlie Adelson, the brother of Wendy Adelson, is arrested. So now I'll give you a bit of the backdrop of grandparent alienation. And if you have any questions you want to ask me here, do you want to ask me anything? And I'll go forward.
Yeah. So basically, and you're going to get into this more, but there was alienation tactics. And can you add a couple examples maybe, or one of what the grandmother, what Donna would say to the boys before the murder that was upsetting? I can remember a couple things that not that she said to the boys, she stirred the pot, like with the Hitler Youth thing. Can you speak about that real quick?
So there was 2 issues really in the big picture of why the divorce happened, plus other things. One was there was a difference of religious practices, and Donna particularly objected to the children having kosher food. Now, Dan and Wendy brought kosher food, means non-pork or non-seafood, and to the daycare, and they would bring tofu and hot dogs that the kids could eat. Now, Donna then goes to the daycare and tells them, give them regular hot dogs, give them beef, give them everything the kids are eating. So she's now sabotaging right at the daycare what their food plan should be. She also takes them to McDonald's and gives the kids cheeseburgers, which is against the Jewish religion, which is basically combining milk and meat together. So this is where we start with the food. Then starts with the relocation issue. Right after the divorce and the separation, Donna wanted right away that the children should move to South Florida. And they had a petition in the court, and the petition with Judge Hobbs was refused to allow them to move to South Florida. In other words, the children Wendy and the children would go and move with Donna and her family there, and Danny either could stay in Tallahassee or come along. But the judge threw out this whole petition and said, you have two loving parents in Tallahassee. At the time, they both had jobs at the university, and enough is enough, and they weren't allowed to appeal it again. This boxed Donna into the wall. This is now. And then she started to create these plots about how to get the children to relocate to Florida, and what are the schemes that she created for Wendy to attempt to do. Now, remember, Danny has quite a strong affiliation and Jewish identity. So the first plot that Donna comes up with is that the children should be brought up Catholic and tell him this. In other words, provoke him and then put him in Hitler outfits. Now, this, you can imagine what destruction this is. I mean, this is not just doing it to anybody. He has really a strong identity. And then after that, she tells them, Wendy in emails, that she should give him $1 million to bribe him. And Wendy, Charlie, and Donna would split the expense to bribe Dan to allow them to come to South Florida. And that's the background of the shenanigans related to all of these activities.
So it sounds to me like Grandma Donna was gasoline on a fire, so to speak. That she really seems to me like she was the more aggressive of the two, of Wendy versus Donna. It seems like she was really hyper aggressive to do those types of things and to strategize those types of ideas. It's just cruel. I can't think of a better word.
It is. It's more than cruel. It's evil. And the other thing is, it's very good that Wendy never followed through on those ideas, and that provoked her even more. So these are some of the things that is the backdrop, of Donna's involvement.
So my next question is, okay, so many years have passed since the murder, which happened in 2014. Certainly the family has given you lots of access, considering you have to travel. It wouldn't be every other weekend, for instance, but you'd have to come in from Toronto to southern Florida. How's access been? Have you been given unimpeded access to the boys?
No, we were cut off. So now I'm going to go now to the probable cause affidavit in 2016 when they named the family. And at that particular point, there was a lot of conversation in Tallahassee with the state attorney at the time, with the police, with the FBI, about arresting all the family. So the fact that there were 3 people already arrested, but there was talk right away of other members of the family. I got very nervous in that particular time, that I was worried that if Donna was taking the children to school every day, and if there was a chance of an arrest, the children would go right away to the Department of Family and Children's Services. And so, and though, with no sort of opportunities, because that's also there's a short horizon, and I didn't know who else is getting arrested. So I just made an inquiry into an organization if there's an emergency beds for young children. And there was an organization called JAFCO, which is a Jewish organization, but it's actually licensed or affiliated with the Department of Family and Children's Services. And the point there was that they have, very few places have this. They have picture a daycare, and they have 3 beds where emergency situations where kids can sleep over overnight until there's a plan. And so that became really a very viable resource for me. And then actually Wendy then found out that I had looked into it, and she then said, I'm looking for foster care, but it can't even be foster care because you can't do foster care without a court involvement and so forth. And this was just really a whole balloon to create a lot of noise. I should say something already. This is now all in 2016. 2015, Wendy changed the names of the boys. Okay, so she did this all on her own with I'm visiting still. And in that particular time, so this is the first 2 years, I'm going frequently. And so we're Canadian and we have lousy winters. So it's very common for Canadians to be snowbirds. So I could be down there for 6 months. So I had opportunities to frequently, see the children. But I went down with my Canadian grandchildren. This was now in September of 2015. And Wendy writes me a note, an email the night before. I want you to know I've changed the names. And they're no more Markel. They're now Adelson. And she also dropped the middle name of Benjamin because it had, in our religion, you honor somebody at the point of, when they're died, and you would use their name. So she did that. So basically, as people have said frequently, she really was beginning to cut us right out. So that's the backdrop. And then after that, in 2016, we just were not allowed to at all visit. And we tried through the back door, the lawyers, we had lawyers, they have lawyers, no luck. Now, up until the point of 2016, 2017, now remember, Danny's murdered in 2014. We were not one of these families which go out at the very beginning. It was a high-profile case. Phil and I, that's Dan's father and the grandfather, we never went out to the public and said, how many lawyers, I want to say, I don't want to use the word drag their victims through, but they certainly, present to get sympathy for the victims. We had never done that, and it's a high-profile case. But in 2016, because it's such a high-profile case, we went on Dateline. We went on ABC 2020. We talked on the Wondery podcast, which has probably today over 10 million listeners. I think it's even higher. But we talked about the fact that we were cut off. And this brings us to grandparent alienation in terms of the circumstances for which a grandparent is suddenly cut off from their children. And that's how we tried. We tried to give it a voice, and that didn't work. And then I continued with other things, with advocacy.
So there's a long stretch of time, wasn't it? A 6-year stretch of time where you were denied complete access. And when I say you, I also have to extend it out to your husband, Phil, your daughter, Shelley. And also Shelley has
Dan's father, Phil, and Shelley's family with 3 big kids.
So we're talking not just you and Phil, we're talking a whole section of the boys' family tree being denied access. To me, that just goes back to the word that you used, is it's evil to deny innocent people that you just want to be in their lives. And it's not like you can see them that often anyways, based on the distance between Toronto and Miami, Florida.
Yes, it's also, and it's not just us. They had been coming to Toronto, for a lot of the Jewish holidays. We have what we call here a country home, which is like a second home for skiing and for summer activities. And they had come down, used to bring the kids here for a month. It was a lifestyle thing. And they have a lot of cousins. So it's a big family in the sense of all of, the extended opportunities and friends. And so the boys really lost out like a tremendous amount. And it was devastating for all of us because we wanted to build a united family. And especially now, Danny's not here. and we want to like keep the boys, not far away from us, but with us, so to speak. So what happened after this continued for, you said, 6 years? Our lawyer in New York said to me, Ruth, you're going to have to write a bill, and you're going to have to think about how are you going to get from grandparent alienation, from this cutoff situation, to being able to address visitation. And I joked and I said, a bill? I'm sitting in Toronto. I'm going to write a bill in Florida. Like, how is this ever going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I sat on this for a few years. But all my other friends, American now, started mentoring me. Okay, we're going to start helping you look for lobbyists and this and the other. I didn't do anything for 3 years. And I want to mention this because I only was able to do something after Garcia's trial in 2019. And why I want to say this is it's very common for families who are in grief and families who've had what I call homicide survivors. They have this idea, they want to memorialize the child, they want to do something, but you're not capable yet because you're so involved in the whole trauma of the situation, this is murder. I mean, this is not, we're now past divorce disputes, we're in murder, we're in a murder circumstance of Dan. I'm not saying of the murderers, I don't know who the murderers are, but I'm talking about we are experiencing a murder and a criminal case. So it's a hard period of time. But what happened after Garcia's trial in 2019, I'm in Tallahassee, and I must have felt a little freer. And I'm at a hair salon. This is a funny story. And I meet this young woman who I could see is Danny's age. As soon as I walked in, she says, can I give you a hug? I said, sure. And I said, okay. And then she says, what can I do for you? We go for a coffee after. And I just blurted out grandparent alienation. I'm sitting on it for 3 years. And so much else is happening that day. We still have the death penalty on the Monday. This is a Friday to a Saturday. And then I just said grandparent alienation. And she says, done. This is a miracle story. And she, Karen Halpern Cyphers, works in Tallahassee, has all these connections. She's a partner today she's an owner of a large media firm there as well. And we start for 2020. I mean, now October 2019, 2020, she gets Senator Jeff Brandes to introduce it into the Senate. It didn't go in 2020. It didn't go in 2021, where we worked on the bill language. But in 2022, this is the most exciting part, just last year, it was passed in the Senate unanimously. It was passed in the House very, very successfully. And on June 24th, 2022, Governor DeSantis signed a bill, and it's called the Markel Act.
That is incredible to think that it takes somebody from out of the country, not out of the state, to be able to have to do this to begin with. Because you're right. The court systems across America do not protect. There are a couple exceptions. I don't know which ones they are, but they do not protect grandparents at all. And you show me an alienated parent, I'll show you more than likely, and probably 80 to 90% of the cases, an alienated grandparent as well. They are just important. They are just as loving. They're part of the whole family tree. So by excluding grandparents, it's hurting the kids. And that's so awesome. You got this enacted. It's called the Markel Act, just to review what you just said. And it's less than a year old, isn't it? Have you had any stories yet of people having used it or used it as a threat, so to speak?
I just got it. I just got today through Facebook a request. I've had a few people have terrible situations in Florida. It has to be in Florida. And they've expressed a desire to learn more about it and how to use it. And we've prepared some directions in terms of how people can actually use the Markel Act. In Florida, the natural parent, this is very significant on all the issues, has very strong rights for autonomy and privacy. It's stronger in Florida than in other places. And that relates to parental alienation and other issues of conflict within the family, and the same thing with grandparent alienation. So the visitation that's allowed in this particular act is limited. And it's only if one spouse is dead, sorry, and the other spouse has been charged civilly or criminally, that the grandparents can take some action through the court system. So it has a narrow perspective, but it's very significant, and so on.
Well, hats off to you for making the effort, and talk about that amazing chance meetup. I don't think it was chance, by the way, between you and Karen Cyphers. Well, so if people want to follow this case, what's the best way? Because there are so many YouTube videos on this case, and it's very vast in the amount of details. What's the best way for someone that's now first hearing about the Dan Markel murder, your son, his murder? What's the best way for someone to catch up on basically the case in 5 or 10 minutes?
I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to Dan's friend, Jason Solomon. I have a whole community, like, it takes a village to solve the problems of grandparent alienation and also this updating through social media. So basically, Justice for Dan on Facebook. All you have to do is Google Justice for Dan posts. So you don't even have to be a member of Facebook, and it has everything current. And I would say that that's the best thing. All you also have to do is you can just Google the Dan Markel murder, and there's hundreds and hundreds of articles. Some of the people who have followed it very well, one person is Tax Prof blog. So that's another one. And he has a very good chronology in there. That's Paul Karen. He's the dean at Pepperdine. And he has probably, if you really need to know more, it's probably one of the best chronologies of the whole case. The other person is who wrote a lot at the beginning and still does, David Latt from Above the Law. And there's no limit, but I would say the best sort of current, quick is Justice for Dan posts, and it has everything that's going on.
And for those people that are interested and want to follow this case, I'm telling you right now is a good time to actually become aware of this case, because finally the police and the FBI, well, police specifically, the prosecutors in Tallahassee are going after what I think are the masterminds in this case. You have three unindicted co-conspirators right now, and one's been arrested. Charlie Adelson is right now in jail. He'll be coming up. His trial will be probably in August, September, October timeframe, something like that. So he'll be the first of the Dennis family to be tried for this case, but he still has his mother and his sister out there as unindicted co-conspirators, and I guess just time will tell whether they'll be arrested too.
Yes, I think that's very, very, very important. And I also want to say that for us, 2022 has been another way a very good year. So just prior and after the legislation was passed and prior to the trial, the retrial of Catherine McBanawa, we did get an invitation from Wendy to see the children. And Phil and I went down on April 20th, and we saw the children for the first time in 6 years. And what's amazing of that story, we were returning on the flight back to Toronto, and the FBI and others called just to make sure we had been successful in our visit. And the next morning, I got a call from the FBI at 6 a.m. Charlie Adelson is arrested. So in 24 hours, we saw the children, and we saw we noted that Charlie Adelson was arrested and who's now in jail, and we're waiting for the trial. So I think that, there is a beginning of, there's new chapters, and I hope that all of these new doors will continue to be open and be effective.
Yeah, and you told me a little bit about how the visitations went, and for those of you curious, how they go, they went very well. Did they not, Ruth? There was no awkwardness. Really, the boys were happy to see you.
What we did is, it's very interesting, because I have the three older grandchildren, the Canadian grandchildren. They're 23, 19, and 16, 17. Everybody's ages are changing now. But why I'm telling you the story is, I asked the 16-year-old before we left, so can we give them a hug? And she said, yeah. She said, sure. And when we saw them, we asked them, they were coming towards us, and it was such a natural thing. And both of them, they basically hugged both of us, and we had a display of basic family pictures from the time they were young, and we had a full opportunity to show them everything, and it really went great.
And one last thing I want to add, I think you'll agree with me, is a lot of parents get despondent after having been, through the ringer in the family courts, not able to see their kids. The kids move away. A lot of parents just check out. They just give up. And I tell them, no, take a pause. You got to look out for yourself first, of course, but never truly give up on them. Maybe go away for 6 months, a year, but never, ever truly give up, because it'd be so easy to. And one day you just feed into the narrative that you're not a good parent. They're going to ask you, well, where were you? Why did you give up on me? I never did that. Today, I have a totally normalized connection with my son. It's like nothing happened. Did we lose years of time spent together? Absolutely. But you know what? In my attitude, I can't change that. We can't change that. That's in the past. And I predict in your case, one day you will be seeing your boys more regularly, and they're going to really get to know the value that you are in their lives, and realize what nice, warm, loving family they have in Canada. So I guess that's a long way of saying there's hope for everybody. Just don't give up. Would you agree with that assessment, Ruth?
I think so. I think there's 2 points in that. One is we should not forget that either in parental alienation or grandparent alienation, the kids are getting hurt. The kids are actually hurting either through hopelessness, helplessness, and all kinds of feelings. And so is the grandparent, for that matter. It's the same way the parent is. But the important part is that you're really showing the children that, you can do repair work. And I think in my case, I also am doing all these programs and the book and so forth as a record. I want a record to tell the children that we never gave up. And they have now enough of a bibliography, I'll even say it that way, to really note that from day one, and through the TV programs, through everything else, we just talked about our priority now is really to let the children know that we love them, they're part of this family, and they're always welcome to join us.
Absolutely. And I did the same thing. I mean, this is your book, Unveiling. I wrote mine called Brainwashing Children, cataloging what we went through, and then giving specific examples how to reverse parental alienation. But yeah, even something as simple as just writing down notes of everything that's going on, or making a new Gmail account that you send, and it's to them, to one day, hopefully you guys will reconnect again, and you can show them all the emails of you reaching out to them. I knew that I had to show some passion in fighting and to let him know, because I knew the narrative painted against me back home was a complete pack of lies. So I had to get out there. So now, not everybody has to write a book. I think we'll agree, but you gotta put effort in. You can't just sit back on your laurels, because people that do this have very sinister ways of influencing these kids. What do you have to say?
No, I would agree with you, and I think the objective external part is important, because in the internal environment, we know already that they've been bombarded with all kinds of, negative comments. Mm-hmm. And so this is just another way to show them there's a window, there's love, there's opportunity, and they're welcome. And I think that's what's most important, is that we are not distancing them from them on our own. Okay. It's not a natural thing for us to want to create this distance, for us to want to create this lack of communication, for us to lack of visiting, and so forth. So I think you have to have a lot of counter, information and love, really, and affection, to really show them that we never gave up.
Absolutely. You can never give up. And what happens very frequently, I can't guarantee it, but I call it the brainwashing boomerang. That one day, all those efforts to sabotage your natural relationship with them comes back to bite them, because most kids get to the point in their adult lives where they realize that something was not right about what mom or what dad did. And they kind of come around and they realize what happened. And if you're there and you're, keeping up with these touch points, the odds are pretty good that you'll have a connected relationship with them again. And then once you do, again, all the, the stuff that happened in the past, all the drama. Do I talk about that stuff with my son when we're together? No, we're talking about what Mavericks game we're going to go to, what are we going to do today, what restaurant we're going to go to. We talk about fun things that we're going to do. It's all in the past. And I think that's the best way to go about this. Never give up. And then when you get together with them, right, Ruth, just be happy. Just don't talk about anything drama related. If they want to talk about what happened in the past, let them bring it up.
100%. I agree with you there. And I think it's to try to make the communication as natural as possible. So if they do have questions, that this is something that they can feel that they would be comfortable to address.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say on that is, and be prepared for them not to ask you many questions. That's happened in my case. And that's fine by me, because clearly if he doesn't want to talk about some of the sordid things that happened in the past when he was between 8 and 12, it's not my business to come in there and, make him feel uncomfortable at all. So thanks so much today for joining us, Ruth. I think we gave out, your website too is ruthmarkel.com, correct?
That's correct. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And then you can see her on YouTube videos. And my brother and I are following this case very deeply. Ruth, if you don't mind my shameless plug real quick. And our new channel is called Jury Trial Mentor. You can see the graphic right there. Check that out too if you want to get into the inner workings of the legal stuff and my brother's legal opinions. But it's a very fascinating case that emanates, of course, from extreme evil, extreme parental grandparent alienation. But I think it's going to go on for the next 2 years, these upcoming trials. What do you think, Ruth?
I agree. I think it's going to be still a long term. I mean, I think that there's now we already just had yesterday, in fact, a delay. We were supposed to have the trial April 24th of 2023, and we're now talking September or October. So I do think that is definitely a possibility. And I want to just say, it's not just the trials. We have appeals. We're still in an appeal situation with Catherine McBanawa. And the public doesn't recognize the fact that it doesn't stop. There's hearings, there's trials, and then there's all the appeal factors afterwards. So I just want to say, hopefully that we'll have the same kind of support all the way through for the next few trials and this community, including you and your brother Carl and a few others that are out there. Everybody has been great. We are blessed, and I say this all the time. And I have gratitude to everybody, to legal advisors, clergy, all kinds of therapists are into all of this story as well. And I think that this is very important.
Very much so. And we really feel for you, Ruth, and all that you've had to deal with. No grandparent should be denied visitation with their kids. It's just an evil act. And our heart's out with you. And let's do another interview later this year, if you don't mind, Ruth.
Sure, I would love to. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Sorry for the bad video switching. This is my first live stream or interview, but I think the content was good. Thank you so much again, Ruth, and we'll see you guys on the next video.